Guys, WhiteSheep here, coming at you with a character bio of Loki Laufeyson. Now, clearly, I'm assuming that most of you watching this channel probably know who Loki is, if not from Thor, then probably from the Avengers. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, of how they've portrayed him. But Loki is currently one of the most well-known characters in comics. I would say, right up there with any of the Avengers, and probably, like, anybody in comics. I think you could throw Loki out in a conversation and most people would get him just because he's had a huge impact on pop culture recently. But there's a lot to the character that some people might not know, and that's what these character bios are for. Now, if you haven't gone ahead and watched WhiteSheep's Hybrids, if you haven't gone ahead and watched Hybrid's character bio for Thor, please go do so, because that's going to be awesome. I haven't watched it yet myself, so I need to do that afterwards, but I'm very confident in Hybrid, and some of the pictures that he's sent me and some of the stuff that he's told me about what he's going to talk about is, awesome, so go check that out for sure. But let's dive right in with Loki. Now, Loki himself is actually a frost giant, and I will talk about the Thor movie later, but they did get a lot of things right. But Loki himself is actually the son of Laufey, the king of frost giants. Odin killed Laufey and adopted Loki as his own son, but it's kind of interesting because Loki was actually small for a frost giant. He was sort of like a runt. Normally, he's kind of Asgardian size, and that's why, Odin took him in, but Laufey was actually hiding him from his people. That's how embarrassed he was of this son that was not a frost giant in any normal sense of the word. And so Odin took him in, but Loki was, he didn't really look Asgardian, and as such was, treated as sort of a second-class citizen by a lot of Asgardians, and took up practicing sorcery. Because of all that mistreatment, he became, really angry and jealous, and he set out to be the most powerful being in the universe. It says, I know it says realm there, but I'm thinking Loki has some higher aspirations. And he starts with these revenge plots against Thor, and eventually, you might think, oh, it's just pranks, he's just a kid, but no, this is seriously lethal plots. He wants to kill Thor and take over. Because, as everyone knows, Thor is probably he's definitely Odin's first choice to replace him because he's actually Asgardian. But Loki wants to, be in charge, so he's going to try and kill Thor. And this continued for many centuries. Remember, this is Asgard, not Earth, so many centuries would make more sense. But Odin intervened, and he's punishing Loki for these actions of mischief. But this was like a repeating cycle. Loki would always try to, gain power and become, the ruler of Asgard. And he's starting off as this God of Mischief, but slowly he's turning into something else. And eventually he gets banished. And eventually he proclaims himself to be the God of Evil. And it's clearly a step up from the God of Mischief, because one's like harmless pranks, and one's like maybe some harmful pranks, and then now it's, God of Evil. And that ties in, interestingly enough, he was journeying in other realms after he got banished, and he took many personas, and Zeus, and I think it was the 1940s and 50s, actually made him the ruler of Hades, which is hell in the Greek mythology. He actually took the name Satan for a while. He was called the son of Satan, but I guess he just shortened it. And he actually dressed as, the devil for a while in the comics before coming back to be Loki. Now, in the modern times, Loki is no longer Satan, but he still has this vendetta against Thor, and he attacks people on Earth, or Midgard, that Thor cares about. And his mischief actually leads to the formation of the Avengers. And I will once again talk about the movies in a little bit. But he sets the Hulk off on a rampage, and that is what leads to the creation of the Avengers as we know them. He also has some powers. He can alter his gender and age, and he's reborn multiple times. That actually, right now, Loki has superhuman strength, speed, durability, healing, stamina, longevity, and he is a master sorcerer, a genius intellect, and he's a master combatant. And that's something that a lot of people might not know, because you look at him and go, oh, he's the God of Mischief, he's just using tricks, he's just using sorcery. But he's actually a very experienced fighter with, a staff or a sword, in addition to his magic using and his genius intellect. Now, I'd like to take some time in the character bio to go ahead and talk about the film portrayals of Loki. As I mentioned, he's sort of a pop culture icon, played brilliantly by Tom Hiddleston in Thor and the Avengers, and I'm already hearing good things about Thor: The Dark World. But he's actually, interestingly enough, because you think, movies take some liberties with, the source material in the comics. Sometimes we actually had a discussion about that on the discussion, but that's why we call it that. But Loki, in addition to being just a stone-cold, badass and killer, he's been portrayed, his origin has been portrayed fairly well. You saw in Thor, he was the son of Laufey. He was actually a frost giant, and he was adopted by Odin. He was jealous of Thor. They got all that pretty much spot on. And they did show him being used in sorcery. But also another thing that I like to talk about is when I was talking about the creation of the Avengers, he actually did pretty much do that same thing, setting the Hulk off. And I mean, it didn't really create the Avengers because we saw that going on behind the scenes, but that was definitely a big part of the movie, him controlling the Hulk, or him trying to control the Hulk to challenge the Avengers. But really quickly, I'd like to also point out a highlight of Thor and Loki. I guess this is also referencing Hybrid's other character bio. This is probably the best part of this, is he and Thor are definitely like brothers. That's a highlight of the relationship. I've heard that's a great thing about Thor: The Dark World, is it's definitely, the interplay between Thor and Loki and Hemsworth and Hiddleston is fantastic. And I remember there was a quote by Chris Hemsworth a couple months ago that summed it up fairly well for me, I think. He loved that in the classic comics, 60s, 70s, Loki and Thor could go from being at each other's throats in one episode, and Thor stopping, Loki in his plans to take over Midgard, or Asgard, or any of the other realms. And the next episode, he would need his help. He would be like, "Come, brother, we must fight something," and they would just be fine again. And then at the next issue, they would be at each other's throats once more. So I think it very accurately portrays, sort of a brotherly relationship. I'm not always trying to kill my brother, but, if any of you have siblings, I'm sure you've been there. And now to wrap it up, let's give you some recommended reading on Loki. Thor's number 348 through 353, Loki number 1 through 4, Thor volume 3, number 12, Young Avengers volume 2, Journey into Mystery, numbers 622 to 645, and Loki, Agent of Asgard. Also, I'd recommend that you go watch Thor and watch the Avengers, because they did get his character pretty much spot on, I must say. And definitely go check out Thor: The Dark World in theaters. It's already out in Europe. It's coming out in America soon, too. So go check that out. I've heard Tom Hiddleston is a real treat and a highlight of that movie. So signing off, I am WhiteSheep. See you next time.